muted. Can you hear me, see me?
Yes, we can hear you.
In my screen, right?
Yes.
Right. Very good. We're looking at number 101. Okay. I can tell you by looking at the answers, I know that that's an Erickson question, right? And I know Erickson stages. I'm going to go back and just remind you of Erickson stages. So again, all I hear all the time is, what's the best way? Give me a shortcut to remember them. Tell me how to remember them. I don't have one. I don't have an acronym. And if anybody's had one that really works for them, please share. What I just teach is they really, really build on each other. And if you understand how they build on each other, that certainly just makes a difference. I'll close out some windows here, guys. Lots of windows open. So Erickson was a psychosocial. So he really was a little bit of Freudian. Okay. So what he talked about was some of the unconscious things, as well as some of the things that were part of our development. So the stages 1 and 2 of Erickson line up with Piaget. I'm sorry, line up with Freud. Oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. Those are Freud, right? OAPLG. So oral and anal line up with the first 2 stages of Erickson. So trust and mistrust, that's the same as the oral, when babies got fixated by putting, mom pulled the bottle out of their mouth too soon. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. If you'll equate that with my the children who are being potty trained. So it was the anal stage, of course, right, with Freud, and autonomy. Think of like my big boy underwear. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I got my big boy underwear, big Superman underwear, and then I saw them. That's autonomy versus shame. So that stage 3 is initiative versus guilt. That is the one time that children do not mind helping you out. Oh my gosh, let me help mom out. And many times they'll bring you the baby, or they want help with the dishes and they make a mess. So then we yell at them, right? So that's what that looks like, is that initiative versus guilt. Okay, so those 3 I think are pretty easy to remember. And then if we look at then 5 through 13, look back. Remember when you were in those elementary school years. Think about your classroom. And many times you have the same classroom all those few elementary school years. Do you remember who was the best athlete in the class? The fastest runner on the playground? The best reader? The one who always, the teacher's pet, the one who always turned their homework in on time? That is your industry, what you're good at. So your industry is, if you think about your city or your town, they're known for something, right? Okay, so your industry is what you're good at. If you're a parent, that's why you put those kids in like t-ball and soccer and volleyball and basketball and dance and everything they could do, because we're trying to figure out what they're good at. So what Erickson said is those elementary school years, that's what you needed to do. Find out who you were. Okay, and then if you did not find out what you were good at, then you'd end up feeling inferior. So as a therapist, one of the things that I always try to tell parents is, if Johnny is doing bad in school, don't pull him out of soccer. If that's the one place he succeeds, let's consequence him. I understand that. But pulling him out of the one thing that he's good at is a real damage to his self-esteem. Okay, and according to Erickson, he's going to feel inferior his whole life. So then 5 to 13, then I get turned 13 and I'm in middle school, and all I want to do is just be like all of my friends, right? Everybody, oh gosh, we call the friends up and we're going to wear this today and this today and this today, okay? My son in 8th grade, my very cute little black handsome boy, wanted spiked green hair because all of his white friends had spiked green hair. So what did mom do? He had spiked green hair, right? So we shaved it on the sides, permed the top, and dyed it green. Because all he wanted to do was be like everyone else in his circle. But hopefully by the age that you're 20 or 21, then you figure that out. If you and your 20-year-old friends are still dressing alike and you get a haircut because they get it, there's some concerns. Okay, so that's identity versus confusion. Not only do you know who you are, then that's when you figure out who you're attracted to. So do you like boys and girls, tall boys, short boys, skinny girls, fat girls? What do you like? That's all that happens there. And then if I can figure out who I am and who I like, then I can go over that whole thing of the identity. My intimacy. I can be in love with somebody, right? Because I know who I am and who I love. So we'll go back 5 to 13, starting elementary school, what I'm good at, identity, who I am. Next one, intimacy, who I can love. And he said you need to be in at least a relationship or relationships. Then you get to 40 to 65. That's my age. Generativity versus stagnation. That we either stagnate, we really stop, or we continue to keep going. And generativity is not only keep going, but the issue of giving back. And then integrity versus despair. That's the end of our life. Sometimes you'll see ego integrity. So you're looking back over your life. Did I live my life with hope and make a difference in the world? Or am I looking at despair and things I wish I could have done? Okay, so that was a reminder of those stages. So let's look at 101. Tell me what that answer might be. You can type in the chat box if you don't want to share, but just give me your answer there, guys. He's beginning to assert his independence. Autonomy versus shame or initiative versus guilt? Which is it? He's having tantrums. His pediatrician tells his mother it's perfectly normal for his age. He's trying to assert his independence. Okay? So that one of the things that I didn't go over that I often think you can figure out, and let me make sure that I go over those, is if you look at what those goals are, what you're supposed to have achieved during those stages. Let me go back to that. So then, hope, will, purpose. And I didn't go over those, so do know those. Okay, so hope is that somebody will come. Will is you're really trying to figure out those terrible twos, trying to get your will. Purpose, competency, fidelity, all of those virtues. So, and I did not go over that, so I do apologize. Let me just copy that image and I'll put it in the chat box. Okay, so then going back to that question, now that we know what the virtues are, get out of that one. Okay, so then he is trying to assert his dependence, and that would be B, his will. Okay, good, good, good. We're going to do number 102. That is Kohlberg. Okay, so again, I know this is Kohlberg because it talks about the different stages and different levels. So Kohlberg had 3 levels, right? Okay. What he said is that, of course, little kids, he was actually a developmental theorist. He was a follower of Piaget. So he believed that people developed their morals. And what he said was, and by the way, Carol Gilligan, if you see her name, she is the one, she worked with Kohlberg, but she said, however, women don't develop that way, that women are born with some innate kind of sense of caring and doing the right thing because we care for so many others that men didn't have. And that's Carol Gilligan. But what Kohlberg said was that children are not born being moral. And if you remember the Heinz story when you were probably in undergrad or graduate school, so you can Google that and look that up. That'll help you kind of better understanding of his theory. But my little kids, that's pre-conventional, younger than 6, they just don't want to get caught. If you remember when your kids were little, they're doing something and they're turning around to see if you see them. That's not because they're really good little kids. They just don't want, it's about them, but they don't want to get in trouble. That's step 2. That's naive hedonism. Hedonism means pleasure, pure pleasure. I will do what I'm supposed to do because I get a sticker. I'll come home with the green smiley face because I did what I was supposed to do. And again, it is not ingrained yet. It is still very superficial according to Kohlberg. And then level 2, you'll see there's again 3 and 4. So they always go together. It'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, 6. You won't see a split in those if they're trying to ask you which 2 it is. Okay, so then my good girl, good boy morality. I just want to be seen as the good person. I just want everyone to think that I'm doing the right thing. Okay. There's been research that talks about, even with the presidential election, and I'm not calling out any favoritism or my bias, but just saying that people believe that their vote is because it's the right thing to do. They might not even like what the candidate stands for, but they'll vote the party vote because it's the right thing. Good girls, good men do this. Okay. Step 4, you conform just so you don't get in trouble. I'm going to follow the speed limit just so I don't get a ticket. They're still not ingrained. It is just kind of doing what we're supposed to do because we want to fit in society, and it should be all of the norm of what we do. Okay. So then 5 or 6 are my post-conventional. What did he say about my post-conventional? Does everybody get there? Exactly. So no, very few of us get there. What he said was that the level 5 will conform to maintain the community. Their emphasis on individual rights. Again, not taking a political stand, just giving you examples. So when it comes to wearing masks, a lot of people really believe that you're infringing on my individual rights. So I'm not going to wear a mask, not because I think it's right or wrong, but I don't think you have the right to tell me that I have to wear a mask. Okay. And then level 6 is the individual principle of consciousness. I'm going to do what I think is right, whether or not it follows the law. So we always look back at like Kevorkian. Remember, he did the suicide. He did assisted suicide, euthanasia before it was legal. Okay, so that's happened. That is definitely something that we've seen in our past. Most recently, you look at like even now, we've had some churches that have in our area, churches that actually sued the local government to stay open. Because despite this is early COVID, so despite what happened with COVID, they really wanted to make sure that they did what they believed was right, and their religious beliefs, their cultural beliefs did not always agree with what the law said. Okay, so those are my levels: 1, 2, and 3. So there are 3 levels, but 6. So I'm going to go back to that question. Look at 102. Okay, be brave. I can't play the Jeopardy theme song. Oh, I got someone who's being brave. 5 and 6. That is the correct answer. It can't be D. It can't be 4 and 5 because we know those two go together. So it has to be 5 and 6. Okay. So they're definitely looking at making sure that, law schma, so the law doesn't, and for the questions most often are going to say, it's not that the law doesn't, you're not aware of the law, you just believe that your beliefs are higher than the law. And again, like Rosa Parks, at the time, what she was doing was illegal in some states. And so she still felt that, that she had the right to sit at the front of the bus. And despite all the things that happened, she still sat there. Okay, so it's not that they're not aware of the law. Okay. Okay, so those are some of my developmental people. Okay, so let's go on to kind of look at some other people. Look at 106. You'll see that question often. There are two types of theories. One is eclectic. Eclectic means I don't have an approach of my own. You know what? I pull a little CBT in, and sometimes I'm going to do some solution focus, and maybe I'll do a little Freudian when it's good for me. That is eclectic. Integrative means I have a theory of my own. I pretty much have a theory that I follow. I usually use CBT, but occasionally a client comes along that needs something that's beyond my CBT that I usually do. And that one is integrative. I'm integrating that into my practice. Okay, so 106, which of the following is the most accurate statement regarding integrative counseling? I see an A. So integrative is another term for the same type of counseling as eclectic. They are not the same. Eclectic is bringing in, I have no base, bringing in something else. Integrative is I'm integrating something that I have into, I'm sorry, integrative is bringing in something into the approach that I already use. So that one is D. Integrative counseling synthesizes processes, techniques from various theoretical views. Okay, that's all that means is I have, I'm pulling in various stuff. Let's rule out and find why the others are not right. And so most often what I'm going to say, if it's a vignette, those longer ones with the story, you'll be able to go back to the question and find the answer in the question. However, many times with these, you just won't be able to. Okay, you just have to know and rule out. So there's going to be two that don't fit, two that obviously are not the answers, and two that are close. And then you have to figure out between the two that are close what the answer is. And most often, like this one, where I don't have enough information, I'm going to compare the two. So then, integrative counseling is another term for the same type of counseling as eclectic. We know that is not true, right? Integrative counseling begins with techniques and ends with a therapist's personal theory. So that is not true because I'm not going to begin with a technique and enter. I'm going to use that. I'm going to borrow that technique and make it part of this whole theory with this client that I'm working with. Integrative counseling is highly generalized theory, which makes use of incongruence. Incongruence is when things don't line up. So congruence is when my mouth and my body and all that language tells you the same thing. Incongruence is when you're getting mixed messages from my body. So it could be incongruent. If you are using a technique that you're not comfortable with, that you've never used before, that would definitely be incongruent. So your client really might be able to recognize that. So then, but that is still not the answer. So integrative counseling is not highly generalized, okay? And it should be congruent with who I am. And when it comes to congruency and incongruency, I'll remind you that the body don't lie. The lips do, but the body does not. So if you've got someone telling you something, you're always going to read that whole body language. They're congruent because we're going to read the body language, which is most often more accurate than what the lips say. Okay, and so that makes D our best choice. Okay. 107, that's existential therapy, existentialist. However, when I see names that I don't see a whole lot of places, I don't give them a whole lot of credence. I'll come back later and do some other things and pick those up later, but I try to focus on just the important things that I know I'm going to need for the test. So if you see a term, a orientation in numerous sources, that's what you're going to look for. Okay, 108. Okay. Someone be brave here for me. It's Christine. Christine's new therapist believes that the client's problems have a social and political sources, that one's personal and social identities are interconnected. Hint, hint. The therapist also believes that the therapeutic relationship is a collaborative process between equals and that androcentric norms are to be rejected. What type of theory does Christine's therapist likely to adhere to? Okay, so going to the question, I'm looking for terms that would fit. Solution focus, what would I look for? Yes, right. Solution focus that's my miracle question. If you woke up tomorrow and things were different, what would it be? Scaling questions 1 through 10, things get better. That's my miracle question. B, my narrative therapy. Narrative therapy is I'm trying to change the stories in my head. The narratives I keep telling myself. My mother said this, my mother said that. Not all of those are bad, I don't think. I can tell you, I still hear some things from my mother. I lived in most of my life in South Florida. Most of my life where it's warm, Miami area, where it's warm all the time. Can I tell you that in my head, I still would hear my mother saying, Pam, don't wear white until after Labor Day. Like, what? I live in South Florida. But those are the narratives that I always would tell myself that I heard in the back of my head. So the goal with a narrative therapy is to rewrite those narratives. Okay? Then my feminist theory, which that is the answer. Feminist theory does not just belong to women. It's about empowerment. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. And then reality therapy, that is also called my choice therapy. That's by Glasser. So what you're thinking is, wow, those are choices that you make in life. Okay. Oh, let's look at Justin, 109. Justin has not always had problems, but currently needs some help adjusting to changes in college. His therapist sets specific goals right away. She tells him that he does not necessarily need to understand all the problems just to find the solutions. Hint, hint, find the solutions. She also uses a scale of 1 to 10 to measure changes. What type of therapy is this? Oh, come on. Hey, you got it. Thank you. That is solution focus. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Solution focus. I always start with the solution. Sometimes you'll see which is the one that doesn't follow the medical model. That's going to be this one, because solution focus doesn't start with the problem. It starts with the solution. Okay. So then rational emotive therapy, that's my REBT. Remember who that one was by?
Ellis.
That is Albert Ellis. Okay. And some people will ask me sometimes, what's the difference between REBT and CBT? CBT is, of course, changing my thought system, my faulty thinking system. My REBT is looking at my irrational beliefs. And my REBT is going to start off with an event. Something happened. Okay. I lost my job because of COVID. My husband left me. Something happened. That's the event. And then my belief about the event. So, my husband left me because I am, short and fat and I can't cook and I'm not smart. All those things that he may have told me that I began to believe. So then there are emotional consequences for that. If that's what I believe about myself, am I going out to try to pick up a doctor? Probably not, because I think I'm short and fat and ugly and dumb and all those good things. Okay. So then if my therapist comes along and she does D, she then disputes the beliefs, right? Hey, wait a minute, that's not true. Let's go back and look. You know what? Let's look at what he did and the choices he made. Then that allows me to have new belief system. So then I'm more likely to say, hey, wait a minute, you know what? It wasn't me. It didn't work, but it was him. And therefore I've let go of that. My new belief, let go of those horrible emotional consequences. Okay. So that is the REBT of ABCDE of REBT. Okay. Get some of my windows here, guys. There we go. This is a pretty common question for a therapy group composed of adults with a single group leader, which is generally considered to be the optimum group size. Okay, and you'll see different answers. Thank you, Anna. That would be 8. That would be. So what I'm looking for is 8 to 10, 6 to 8, one of those things. If it's children, younger children especially, it's like 2 to 4. And, you know, I can tell you if you've ever done a group with little kids, oh my gosh, even the 4 is too much. Okay, you spend most of your time really working on like the behavior technique. So it is 8 for this one. Okay. I'm going to skip those until we come back to talk about careers, but those are career people that you should know. Okay, so 115. Which of the following is the best synonym for the term appraisal? I always remember when I'm thinking about the appraisal of a house, the appraisal of your car. They're going to come out, they're going to look at it, they're going to make a value judgment, and then give you an answer. So that's the key when I'm looking for an appraisal. Is it an assessment? Does assessment give me the answers? An assessment is just the tool. Exactly. It's B, an evaluation. An assessment is the tool. When Pam was talking before, I said, you know, we're looking at the MMPI, that's the Minnesota Multiphasic. I'm looking at all of those. Those are my assessments. But if I just take an assessment and I don't know the evaluation, can you imagine? You take and many of you have to wait in the mail, but you take the NCE and then you don't get an answer? Like, whoa, I want an evaluation. Don't just give me the assessment, give me what it means. Okay, so appraisal is an evaluation. It's the testing part as well. Okay, that's a research term, guys. I'm going to skip those. I do suggest that you study some of those. We'll come back to those in a different session. Okay. Let's go to 125. That's one of the ones you'd find in a helping profession or even, you know, the ethics issue. So look at 125. Which of these is true about professional liability insurance for counselors? Which of those is true? That answer is B. Insurance is required by law in some states, but not in others. So remember, everyone takes the same tests when it comes to the clinical piece. That credentialing, that's the same test everywhere. Now, some states do add an additional part. We have to cover the local laws. However, that is why there's not always reciprocity in every state. Okay, the clinical piece is the same, but your score is not the same. So in my southern states, I'm usually still finding a lower score. And in my higher state, my northern states, my Texas, my New York, California, Florida, I'm finding definitely a higher number than the lower states. It's the same test, but each state gets to decide whether or not you're passing. Okay. Look at 109, David Levinson. He talked about men, and the seasons of life was his book. He said that all men have crisis all the time. He didn't say that. He said men have different crises, and the midlife one is just one of them. He also suggested that if you had a crisis like with teenagehood or any kind, you had those life changes, that the midlife crisis would just be more likely to happen. Okay. So David Levinson's work has been criticized as being too limited because. And the answer is B. He only studied the structure of life for males and he excluded females. Okay, but I think that was the point of his work. I'm pretty sure he just really wanted to make sure that men were understood. Just saying. Okay. So this is a cultural question, okay? And if you do not know the racial identity model, it doesn't look like this in the blue book, the green book. It doesn't look that way, okay? But this is the racial identity model, okay? And if you've had me before, I will tell you I am extremely familiar with the identity model for people of color. I'm not as familiar as the one for white people. I'll be honest with you, that's a racial difference. For the people of color, I can, I've lived that with my own children, so I know what it was like for them as I went through these. Again, I'll put a copy of this in the chat box. You'll have a copy of this. But the terms that we're looking for, at least for this question, he's talking about assimilation. So assimilation is when the person who is not from the main culture, so that I'm Asian, I've moved to America, and I've assimilated. The question might say, little Johnny, now talks back to his grandmother, and he's of Asian descent. That would not be acceptable in an Asian community prior to him coming to the United States. So he's assimilated. He's looking as similar as every other kid. Okay, and then acculturation is you add a culture. You're adding a culture that your culture, you move to the United States or a different country and you add that culture to it. Separation is when you move here or move to, again, a different country and you preserve your own culture and choose not to have anything to do with the main culture. I lived in Miami. I went to school in Miami, and I had a teacher who would tell me up in America. So because many times in especially towns, areas where it's predominantly Hispanic, that that was there. So the main culture was Spanish. The signs were in Spanish. Everything was bilingual. That was part of it. So there was not a need to integrate or to assimilate or to acculturate because that was the area. Okay, so again, I'm going to put this in your chat box. And remember, this is videotaped, and you will be able to go back and watch it. The other part of it was not taped. I'll remind you of that. Okay, I'll put that in right there. Okay, go back to that question. Okay, so look at 128. Okay, 128 is A. Okay, acculturation, adding a culture. So Manny's process was acculturation and Mo's process was assimilation. Okay, guys, I do have to let you go. I do have another client waiting. If you know me, I have clients usually scheduled on the hour. I hope that you found today's session to be beneficial. I'm really just